Good afternoon, Hedgeye Nation. Welcome to another episode of Sector Head Spotlight. This week, I've got the one, the only, Mr. Felix Wang, aka the Sector Head of China. So, thank you, sir, very, very much for joining me today. I'm very excited to dive into your sector and your process and your background. So, thank you.
Happy to be here, Robert.
Absolutely.
Good to see you.
Yeah, cheers. So for those at home, for those that might not, be as familiar, the process here is going to go through a bit of Felix's background, then dive into his process, and it's quite data oriented, as many sector heads here at Hedgeye is. And lastly, we're going to finish off with some key themes for 2023 that we want to get across to you at home. So with that, Felix, I know you've got a fun background because it's a little bit different than some of the other sector heads here, where you actually started as an associate or an analyst for Todd Jordan, and
Absolutely.
yeah, so would love to kind of just dive into how you progressed here throughout your time at Hedgeye.
Sure. So a little bit about myself. I'm a Southerner at heart. I grew up in South Carolina. I still have family down south. I also have extended family in China. But I've had a couple of short experiences career-wise in trading and also in research before coming to Hedgeye. But Hedgeye has been my home.
Right.
I've been working here for over a decade. As you mentioned, yes, my beginnings was with the one and only Todd Jordan of the Gaming and Lodging Leisure team. But I also had some mentors along the way from that experience. So really appreciate everything that he and his team has done to help me sort of develop as an analyst and try to figure out how to add value. That's at the end of the day, people only care about, can you help us make money?
Absolutely.
That's all that matters.
Absolutely.
So a little bit about, how I got into research and Hedgeye. So, I got interested in research just because I like picking apart companies um, and trying to understand different disruptive technologies out there. And frankly, I'm an introvert. So, I figure research is a good fit. Um, Although a couple of drinks may bring out some wild side, just like everybody. So that's a little bit about myself.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. So again, typically what we do next is we'll go through your process, Felix, and as I mentioned, it's quite data oriented. You even hosts what do you call it, an Algo show, right? Where you go through, a lot of your like the data that your algo spits out. So uh, so yes, why don't we, Ethan? Why don't we pull up slide 3 and we can go through kind of how to get an edge and let Felix kind of walk us through things.
Yeah, absolutely. So this slide I show every time I do a presentation. Actually, I should update it a little bit because my approach has gotten a lot more detailed. But it kind of gives you, in a nutshell, how we're different from everybody else, other than the fact that I'm just the best looking Asian analyst out there. But I need more than that. So one way is through proprietary data that I've been able to kind of put together to try to gain sort of a real time viewpoint on a lot of the KPIs out there that people care about. At the end of the day, it's about driving edge, right? So one way is through data. Another way is through context. So I do, Robert, talk to a lot of people in my coverage space, not only to companies but general context I've been able to build in my Rolodex. That allows me to keep in touch with a lot of the on the ground
Sure.
tidbits since I'm not in China 24/7. So that's been very important in my process just because I'm able to discern what people care about, what's meaningless that maybe the media is talking about, and figure out if there's an opportunity, either long or short. So these contexts that I've been able to build, and it's not just China, it's mostly Asia-based people that I've been able to be in contact with and that we've been able to build a relationship with. These contacts have been extremely important to my process.
Yeah. And is that one way that you kind of sift through the Chinese coverage universe, because it is quite broad and diverse, right? I mean, you've got everything from from fintech to education to like actual gaming. So I mean, it's quite
Right.
your coverage universe is quite broad. So
That
how do you try to think through kind of, again, like if you look at that multi-pronged approach, again, I don't want to say like one thing drives another, but how do you kind of sift through that data that you get, and then in conjunction overlaying that with your contacts and stuff like that?
So you made a great point about type of the coverage ecosystems that I'm responsible for. The reason why I decided not to just zero in on a particular industry
Yep.
like general research analysts do is
Yep.
just because China in particular is extremely complicated. When you have Chinese tech giants, they want to basically conquer everything that's hot,
Right.
which means they're like the octopus. They have tentacles in a lot of different verticals, a lot of different industries. As a result, it makes my job kind of fun because I get to learn about a lot of different things,
Yeah.
not just focus on pay entertainment or e-commerce or education. So because a lot of these companies, they have exposure to all of these verticals and
Yep.
industries. So as a result, I've had to become more of a generalist
Sure.
to cover China. I think that's the way that people should approach this. It's also an advantage for us because I feel like a lot of the sector-specific analysts who cover China sometimes miss the bigger picture because
Interesting.
they're just narrowed
Right.
to their particular industry and
Yeah.
they can't really talk about other industries, particularly for tech giants, right? So they have to talk to 5 different analysts just to
Yeah.
understand one company, whereas they should have a broader perspective on this matter and try to, understand the company from many different angles.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Ethan, do you want to bring up slide 5 there, and we can just dive a little deeper. So just for those at home that may not be as familiar with China, Felix, maybe you can kind of just review some of the 6 or so kind of key sectors that you focus on.
Sure. Yeah. So my bread and butter is mainly pay entertainment and e-commerce. I've put a lot of focus on those two ecosystems, and there's at least 40 companies, I would say, in that two parts, two industries. Look, part of my process is data. So a lot of the data that I've able to put together and to dive into insights and share with them with my clients took a lot of time, and particularly on the e-commerce side. So I share something called a GMV database with my clients every month. It's an extremely popular way to, GMV is just one indicator, but it's extremely important indicator for people who follow e-commerce and retail. So I'm able to, through some complex algorithm methodology, I'm able to sort of map out what's going on the transaction side for many of the major players in China. So that's been one product that's been extremely popular with my clients. And then, look, I think if you go to the next slide, there's just different ecosystems that I try to map out again on sort of real-time KPI that people may care about. But at the end of the day, it's all about adding value. So it may not be just data oriented, and that's something I stress to people who follow my research is, you may be stuck on a particular data point, but at the end of the day, if you miss the forest, if you miss the big picture,
Yeah.
you may miss out on that opportunity. So don't be too data oriented is what I would say. Try to understand where, from a broader perspective, where that company is positioned. Obviously data helps, but try to figure out where their advantages and disadvantages are and how they're positioned in a very competitive ecosystem, and then go from there.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, and I think a perfect example is in the last week or so with your pivot on Pinduoduo, on PDD, right?
Yeah, we were lucky.
And,
Look,
and
yeah.
I mean, it was great. One, it was a great tactical decision that you made, and two, it was one of those things for for many at home or for those that kind of listen in, we can get a little bit of a bad rap in being everybody kind of thinks about us as day traders, right? But you were long PDD for what feels like forever. I mean, he's named his bloody bird after
Right.
Pindoy Doy. So, and I'm butchering that by the way, but
No.
okay, close.
Very close.
Very close.
Yes.
Good. But no, but I mean, I think that's again. I mean, it just goes to you're flexible in terms of the way that you approach your coverage list, right? And you're not stuck. You use the data when the data and or some of your other signals sort of are leaning you towards a pivot. You have no problems pivoting.
That's a great example because it wasn't just data that led me to this difficult decision to take off PDD from our long list. And yes, I did name it after my bird, who's becoming a lot more grouchy these days than when he was a baby bird. So we have our differences in our opinion on Pinduoduo. But my point is, it's not just data. I talk to a lot of people, so I have an understanding of if this idea could be potentially a crowded idea, could be potentially where everybody is positioned. That's dangerous because it can, if you're short it could be a huge short squeeze. And if you're long it, well, even if they beat, is it really going to drive the stock higher just because a lot of the investor expectations are probably higher than what you would see from a Yahoo Finance or from, Bloomberg estimates out there. So that's something to keep mindful of, right? So yeah, we were pretty lucky with the pivot. I generally think Pinduoduo is a good company. It's a disruptor and it has been a safety play. But I've always said, don't be married to your ideas. Right? If conditions change, if the environment is different this year versus last year, be more adaptive. Be able to change your opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So next, I know you got your proprietary algo. Would love to just kind of have you walk me through because I've actually never really asked you this question before. So we'd love to kind of just understand a bit better. So how it works into your process, some of the kind of key things, your takeaways from your algo and that kind of thing.
Sure. Look, I try to measure more of the user engagement side. I have a variety of different sources I use to measure user engagement. One is my proprietary algo, which measures things like time spent, MAUs, DAUs, so forth. So I focus mainly for that product in the paid entertainment industry. Always trying to refine that product, but it's just something different than some of the other, I call them third-party data providers out there.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm constantly refining the process, but so far it's worked out pretty well for many of the companies I cover.
And you said it's primarily geared towards your paid entertainment list?
It's primarily, yes. And the paid entertainment is always evolving, and there's different changes to how mobile data is collected or PC data is collected. So as a result, my process there had to evolve with it.
Sure.
I'm also, yes, it's a proprietary product, but I also have relationships with a few big data sort of centric AI-driven companies in China to help me sort of understand what type of data is being released. And, so it's not just myself and the team here at Hedgeye, but I also have some relationships with some big data-driven AI firms out there as well.
That's great. That's great. And then you tie that into one of your things that you call kind of scoop and algo, right? So you scoop and algo calls. Yeah. So how could you just maybe build upon that a little bit? So how do you kind of what's that process? What does that look like? What are those what are those calls kind of?
So scoop and algo, I host this every month. If I don't host it, it's probably because I'm working on a big idea. And it's taking up a lot of my time. But if normally I try to do it at least once, at least monthly, and they're just more sort of data updates, things I'm hearing on the ground through my merchant contacts, and then also through sort of controversial topics that I've been having with my clients. So it raises more questions, and I hope to have more of a dialogue when I have these scoop and algo calls. So they've been generally geared towards, a couple of major industries that I follow, particularly e-commerce. But it's basically anything that I find of value through my coverage space that I share with my clients. And again, everybody's busy. 1 hour to me is a very long presentation. So I try to keep these relatively um, relatively concise,
Sure.
under 30 minutes or so, just because,
Yeah.
we want to hit the point and then
Absolutely.
move on. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know most recently one of your themes has been around luxury leading the charge and how that's kind of impacting your space and that kind of thing. So yeah, do you want to? I know most recently I read where
Sure.
the handbag prices and stuff like that for Louis Vuitton's there's markup. I did have a question there. Is that at store in the retailer or is that kind of through like third parties?
It's a third party channel.
Got it.
I mean, it's sort of they have they have a relationship with Louis
Louis,
Vuitton, so
yeah.
it's official channel, but
Got
it's
it.
not Louis Vuitton
Got
themselves.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Then it's not just them. I think a lot of the luxury retailers are raising prices just because the Chinese demand there has been very sticky, particularly through the difficult macro environment in China in the last few years,
Yeah.
with zero COVID, and then you had the regulatory crackdown. One segment that didn't really feel much impact was luxury. So if you were a rich shopper, you couldn't care less, and you kind of stuck to your shopping habits.
Sure.
The difference this year is if you want to travel, you can, right? The obstacle in the past was not really you couldn't travel outside. It's just coming back. You had to go through a lot of quarantine and requirements just to go back to your family. Nowadays, no one cares about COVID tests today. Like, nobody cares. You can go out if you want and travel and then come back. No screening whatsoever. Very little, I would say. So it's now about what kind of airline capacity there's there to go to these countries, right? That fly out of China, and it's gonna take some time to get back to pre-COVID type of activity. But luxury spending, there's a lot of pent-up demand. 3 years of being stuck in your home, not being able to do anything.
Yeah.
People want to travel. People want to go to a lot of the destinations, including Europe, including Macau, Hong Kong, Singapore, Maldives. All of these luxury kind of exotic destinations are going to feel a huge, and they already are, boost from inbound tourism.
Yeah.
From China. So I like the luxury guys in particular.
And so in terms of the travel as well, I mean, obviously Todd, in your background in gaming, lodging, leisure, do you have any insights there, or kind of like from a theme standpoint in regards to either gaming or you mentioned Macau? So any ways of kind of playing China through that, like outside of Todd's space?
So I'll let Todd talk
Yeah,
on
sure.
Macau. What I would say is generally focus where the luxury spenders are going.
Got it.
Right. So one place is Macau. So yeah, visitation is going to pick up.
Yeah.
Another place is like South Korea, Thailand. Figure out which companies care and are dependent on Chinese tourism,
Sure.
and those companies will outperform this year.
Interesting.
Just because it's going to come back. I mean, people are itching to travel.
Yeah.
They want to make sure. In the past, it was just more about restrictions and the hassle.
Right.
Now you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
As China slowly and wobbly return back to sort of a normal state post-COVID.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So any other kind of additional themes that you are really gearing in or honing in on for 2023 here?
So one thing that I've been pitching pretty hard ever since December of last year was the whole theme of offline versus online.
Sure.
And I still feel very strongly about this, that online in some respects peaked last year, just because even though COVID had a lot of disruption to the supply chain and so forth, they were a huge beneficiary. When you think about people being stuck at home, what did they have to do? They have their phone and they have their computer.
Yeah.
There was nothing else available.
Right.
That's not going to happen this year. People are going to go out. They're going to have fun. They're going to meet with their friends. They're gonna drink bubble tea. They're gonna go to the movies. What are they not doing? They're not doing as much with their phone.
Sure.
Okay, so online platforms, none of the management teams that I follow have really honed in on that because they know it could be a potential negative this year to growth. I still feel very strongly about that. So when you look at my long short position monitor, I'm way overweight a lot of the offline names, and I'm underweight or even short some of the online names. So so far it's been playing out that way. So I feel optimistic that trend, that divergence will continue this year. The only offset to that is if China does a V-shaped recovery. And so far we haven't seen it.
Right.
Okay, so if they have a V-shaped recovery, then everybody benefits because increased consumption, increased spending power. That's been a government priority. The past couple of policy meetings. So people are optimistic, but I want to be a little bit more safer in case there's more of a wobbly path this year for China's reopening. So I like the offline plays better.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, last question here, Felix, but I can't leave this interview without talking about the boxes on the desk. So,
Yeah.
and so, I know Keith sits next to you. His desk is right next to you. He stands all day long. Tell me the story, man. I need to hear it from you.
First of all, I don't know how Keith is not able. I never seen him sit at all.
I know.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And he has great posture. So I got influenced by him, obviously, since I sit right next to Keith every day, and I have a bad back as well, but my posture is like Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's really bad. I'm hunched so much. So one way I thought was to stand up a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Get the blood flowing through. So it's. I tried doing the boxes because I couldn't wait for another standing desk. So I kind of did it the old-fashioned way.
I love it.
Piling up.
I love it.
Before the boxes, it was just stacks of printer paper. I don't know if you know.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, but then I was like, there was some boxes around, so I didn't want to waste the printer paper. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, sir. I appreciate it. That was another episode of Sector Head Spotlight. We'll be back next week. Thank you very much for your time, and see you soon.
Oh, great. I like that.